We're going to use red. It's Valentine's Day, not Halloween. Angela was the first to speak. It was 2 weeks until Valentine's Day, and with Angela as the chairperson of the high school's committee, everyone was under the pressure to make it perfect, as Angela would say. I stand for perfection and nothing less, always. Almost everyone in the school had one thing or another to do concerning the upcoming Valentine's party. The Great Valentine's Party of Delbador High School. The only party that could be talked about, or else it wasn't a party. Angela was always, and would probably always be, the chairperson of the committee till she graduated from the school. She had the characteristics of a leader, but a bossy one. And while she actually thought everyone liked her, many just tolerated her because she was dating the most handsome guy in school, and probably the most talented, Jason. Go! She yelled at everyone at the table before we all scrambled to find our way out of the meeting room. I didn't like or hate Angela, but she was not on my list of people to choose for life if I had to. She was pretty, yes, but a bully and a mean human being. Thinking about it, I wonder how her boyfriend coped with her. I went ahead with the job she had given me and some other people she grouped with me for publicity. Arrangements upon arrangements, yelling upon yelling of Angela, and Valentine's Day was eventually here. According to Angela, everyone had to wear a particular shade of red, and if they didn't, they wouldn't be allowed to go in, even if they had the most beautiful dress, which was almost impossible in my dictionary because no one would want to beat the dressing of Angela. They'd have to go the extra mile. Heels and glitter filled the hall as everyone walked in with their dates hand in hand and eyes locked on each other. When Angela walked in with Jason, it was as though everything stopped for a second. I could agree that she was probably the most beautiful girl to be made on planet Earth. Her skin, her eyes, her hair, and her dress were all perfect for her, like she was made for that particular moment, to shine among many others, the sunflower among lilies. You're actually beautiful, I complimented her. Yeah, I know, you were probably just blind before now, she said, her face void of any emotion. I saw Jason go almost numb beside her. I wondered how he was still with her, despite their behaviors being very different. He was the calm type, patient and friendly. And his girlfriend? Not so, well, she was just a snake. She whispered something to Jason, who nodded his head. For a second, I wondered where she was going, because everything was already perfect, and there was nothing for her to correct anymore. The curious part of me pushed me to follow her silently, tiptoeing after her in the dark. The glitter on her cloth was the only thing producing light in the dark hallway. She looked back constantly to be sure no one was following her, and I stayed very quiet to be sure she didn't know anyone was following her. She walked into the boys' locker room. I was confused for a second. What could she want in a boys' locker room? Just a few feet into the room, and she pulled off her clothes, revealing her underwear and a larger part of her skin. I followed her silently into the room. She walked toward the only ray of light that was in the room. I saw a shadow seated on what looked like one of the chairs in the corner of the room. "Welcome," a voice said. The voice was very thick and sounded like one of the boys on the team, but I couldn't pin down who it was exactly. But I knew I'd heard the voice somewhere before. I heard Angela whimpering and crying silently while pleading at the same time in a very low tone. "Dad, please," she said. "Shut up and do what you ought to do," the voice said again. Dad, I thought. I tried to peep. It was the first time I heard Angela vulnerable. She was always the bold one, never giving her feelings away or letting her feelings be trampled upon. But this time, I was hearing her cry, scream, in fact. And hearing Dad at the same time, it had to be a joke. I saw Angela on the floor with a man, having his back towards me, pinning thumbtacks all over her body. He kept on pinning them all over her as she bled and screamed. Then, what I saw next shook me to the core. "Coach Turner?" I said silently, but not loud enough for them to hear that someone was there. I ran out of the room immediately, but was stopped by a bigger figure who, after a couple of seconds of pause, let me go. I heard intense screams and a lot of hitting after that. I went back to see the lighted room full of commotion between Coach Turner and Jason. I pulled Angela to the side, comforting her. Seeing her like that, I could not control my tears. Coach Turner was helpless on the floor, with Jason giving him punches, until his friends picked him up before the whole situation turned into a murder. "How dare you!" he screamed at Coach Turner. "How dare you! You're plain heartless!" Amidst all this, I had dialed 911. The officers came after that to pick Coach Turner out of the school with handcuffs. How did Jason know? Why on earth was your father doing that to you? I asked Angela in the hospital. She only nodded to my questions amidst tears and pain. She told me that Coach Turner was not her biological dad like everyone thought, but her stepdad, and he'd been treating her like that ever since he got married to her mom. He had threatened her that if she speaks up, her mother would go through hell she would have never even heard of. Jason, being her boyfriend, had previously seen some minor marks on her body, but she would always tell him to calm down and things would eventually become better on their own. I hugged her again. How could she actually deal with all that and still manage to come out unshaken every day? No wonder she's always with the attitude, I thought. Jason walked into the room and hugged Angela, and I gave them some privacy to talk. Jason was the best boyfriend for her after all, and I knew he was going to help her through all the mess.
Relationships should bring the best in both people involved. When you find a person that truly completes you, you feel like anything is possible. And that's what I felt during the first month of my new relationship with Jim. Let me tell you how we met. It was quite simple, actually. Our place, as some people call it, was on the street. I was going home from work and Jim happened to cross paths with me. We both locked eyes, and before I knew it, he surprised me by coming right up, introducing himself. We didn't experience a meet cute or anything like that, but sparks flew nonetheless. We started talking right there in the middle of that busy street, and before we knew it, about 2 hours passed. We exchanged phone numbers, and when I got home, I actually felt like I was floating. I didn't have that feeling before about anybody. It was love at first sight. There was no doubt about it. The next day, we went on our first official date. Dinner, a movie. Jim bought me a giant bouquet of flowers, and everything seemed like it was taken out of a fairy tale. Jim was between jobs, being laid off from his previous position at a local supermarket, but that didn't bother me. It was the last thing on my mind. After a couple more dates, we decided that it was time to move in together. Sure, it was soon, but the love we felt for each other was so strong that we didn't care about how much time passed. Jim moved in with me, in my apartment, and everything was great. Even though he would stay inside all day, not having a job, he would always wait for me to come home from work with a huge smile on his face. Another month passed and things, well, they got a little stale. Our honeymoon phase quickly disappeared and Jim started to show his true colors. He became even more comfortable and lazy. Every day when I got home from the office, I'd stumble upon a pile of dirty dishes in the sink, along with clothes thrown everywhere on the ground and all kind of fast food wrappers on the living room table. I really did try to talk to him, but even though he promised that he would get it together, the next day, the story would repeat itself. Time went on, and with each day that passed, Jim was getting even more lazy and started to take me for granted. You could say that every story has two sides, but hear me out. Besides being the only one that brought money into the household, I also had to do everything around the house. The frustration started to build up, and we started fighting almost every day. And when we magically didn't fight, we would just not talk to each other at all. Jim would play video games without a care in the world, while I would think of solutions to make the relationship work. But here comes one of the worst parts. When we were making love, Jim would not put any effort into it. He would just think about himself, get the job done quickly, and then fall asleep, turning his back to me. That was the last straw. I kept thinking that if this is the situation right now, could I even imagine what would happen in a couple of years? 4 months passed, and as usual, I came home from work, tired. I knew that I specifically asked Jim to take the laundry to the cleaners, as I was super busy that day. I even wrote a note for him so he wouldn't forget. But when I walked through the door, the bag of dirty laundry was still sitting in the exact place where I left it. That was it. I had enough. Jim was playing Call of Duty as usual, so I unplugged the console and had a serious talk with him. I explained that I gave a lot of thought upon the situation, and from every angle which I looked at things, I couldn't find a solution. I told him that we needed to break up. I just had enough and couldn't live like that, and I wanted out. Upon hearing the news, Jim threw a fit, screaming at me and almost crying out of rage. I was shocked, as I never saw him react that way. After the huge fight, Jim grabbed the few stuff that he had left and slammed the door on his way out. Of course, I cried all night, but I knew that this was the right thing to do. He kept texting me, making me feel guilty, and saying that I never would find someone like him. But eventually, having enough of it, I gathered the courage to block him. He kept trying to reach out to me through email, Facebook, Instagram over the next couple of days, but seeing that I wouldn't reply to any of his messages, he decided to quit texting me. To be honest, I was very sad, but I knew that I was a strong and independent woman. I quickly got myself together and tried to move on. Each day, through focusing on work and working out, I felt a little better until I eventually got over Jim. One evening, after about 2 months from the breakup, I was sitting on the couch in the living room, eating some popcorn and searching for a cute show that I might enjoy. While doing so, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I still decided to answer. Upon answering, I could not hear anything on the other line. I kept saying, "Hello?" but it was so silent. So finally, I ended the call. The same thing happened to me for the next 3 days, receiving calls even at 3 a.m. in the morning. I couldn't block the number, so it drove me crazy. But on the 4th day, it finally stopped. I felt relief. Little did I know, the show was just starting. The next day at work, I received an email. I grabbed my phone to see what it was, and I saw that it was a picture. Upon clicking on it, I saw a picture from Jim. He took a photo of his chest that was cut in such a way that it spelled my name, Megan. After seeing the photo, I almost threw up and immediately deleted it. That weird picture threw me off for the entirety of the day. I even had to take the rest of the day off as I needed some time to relax. I began receiving unknown phone calls for the rest of the day, but I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone. Later that night, I managed to fall asleep after a couple of glasses of red wine. At around 2 a.m., I suddenly got up. I thought I heard the front door open. I stood there, in my bed, waiting to hear something else, but it was silent, so I normally assumed that I was dreaming. Upon putting my head on the pillow and trying to fall asleep, a voice startled me. "Hello, my love." "I couldn't stay away," the voice said. I got frightened and jumped out of bed. There he was, Jim. He stood in the corner of the room, without a shirt, with scars on his chest and blood dripping all over the floor. He was also holding a knife, and he said that he wanted to carve his name on my body. I screamed, and I managed to get out of the house, running past him. It was in my front yard, and I yelled for help. Some neighbors, upon hearing the commotion, came to my aid. They called the cops, and after inspecting the house, all they could find was the blood that dripped from his chest. No sign of Jim, and even though they put out a warrant for his arrest, they never found him again.
I've always been somewhat of a romantic. Even though I didn't have long-lasting relationships, I did my best, especially on Valentine's Day. I would go all out ever since I was 10 years old. That's when I had my first girlfriend. I remember that year. I asked my mom to make heart-shaped brownies for her. I went to school holding that big box of brownies ready to give them to Amanda and express my love for her. Of course, when I got there, she was holding hands with Tyler, but that's a story for another time. And hey, do like and subscribe. Fast forward to when I was 24. I was going home from work that very day. It was a little past 5 p.m. I got off the bus and started walking towards my building. But then something caught my attention on the way there. Someone was sobbing somewhere around me, but I couldn't quite see who was it. I kept walking, and leaning against a car was a blonde, beautiful girl who had tears dripping on her red sneakers. "Are you okay?" I asked, being genuinely concerned. She didn't answer. She continued crying and looking at the ground as if the world around her didn't exist. I had two choices right then and there. I could leave her alone, or I could stay and maybe help her out in any way that I could. I'd choose the latter. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be intrusive or anything, but if there's anything I could do to help, let me know." This time she responded. The girl turned her head towards me. Her blue eyes were mesmerizing. "I didn't mean to ignore you earlier. I'm just I'm having a really shitty day. You see, my boyfriend dumped me. Today!" she yelled. I was startled. I started thinking to myself, what kind of asshole would dump his girlfriend on Valentine's Day? He must be a real idiot. But of course I didn't say any of this to her. "I woke up this morning thinking that he'll surprise me with breakfast in bed. He said he'd do it, and because I'm so stupid, I believed him. But instead, I was surprised with a bag with all my stuff. He wasn't even home, and attached to the bag was a handwritten note telling me to get out of his house," she vented, and as she told me this, she cried even harder. Her story was heartbreaking. No one deserved to be treated this way. I looked around and spotted a flower shop on the other side of the street. Without even hesitating, I told her to stay right there and that I'm going to be right back. She didn't know what I was up to. I crossed the street and bought a bouquet of red roses. "Do you want a box of chocolate to go with the bouquet, dear?" the florist asked me. "Oh yeah, thank you," I responded. She handed me the goods. The girl looked stunned as I stood there with the flowers and the box of chocolates. I said that I bought them for her. She started crying even harder and came to give me a hug. I didn't know how to react. "Thank you so much. This is the nicest thing anyone has ever done." She took the gifts and grabbed my hand. "We're together now," she said while looking into my eyes. Something was off. I mean, I get it. They were nice gifts that came out of nowhere, but I didn't want to be with her. I just wanted to be nice. I let go of her hand. "I'm sorry," I chuckled. "Did you say that we're together?" She looked at me as if I was speaking in a foreign language. "Yes, of course we are. We're gonna get married," she said. The entire situation was blown way out of proportion. Married? I didn't even know what I was doing with my life. I took a step back. She looked kind of crazy at that moment. I said that it was nice to meet her, but I had to leave. She couldn't believe what I said. "Oh yeah? You'll be sorry!" she yelled at me as I started walking faster and faster. I looked back and saw her throwing the flowers and the chocolate into the middle of the road. Good thing I didn't live far from there, and I quickly got into the apartment. But as I shut my front door, I had a strange feeling. It was like someone was watching me. I locked the door, made myself something to eat, and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I heard my doorknob turning. I immediately got out of bed and went to see what was going on. I looked through the peephole, but it was too dark to see anything. "I'm going to call the police!" I yelled from inside my house. The person stopped. I waited there for about 5 minutes to listen for anything suspicious, but it seemed like I'd been left alone. As I turned around, the sound of glass shattering made me tremble. I knew it. Someone broke into my house. They must have used the fire escape. But my phone was in my bedroom. I couldn't call the police. The next thing I did was to try to open the front door so I could leave my apartment. But I couldn't. I was trapped in there with the intruder. "Hello?" I yelled, scared out of my mind. I walked slowly, trying to get to the kitchen to grab a knife. But when I got there, someone already beat me to it. "Hello, lover. You forgot to give me a key to your place, but that's okay. I managed to get in anyway." It was that same girl. "What are you doing here? Are you insane?" I asked her, heading toward the bedroom to call the cops. "Are you sure about that? Do you want to be charged for murder?" I found that statement absurd, but as I looked at her, I saw that she started cutting herself with the knife. She made small slits on her arm. "Now come here and give me a kiss," she said. I continued to walk toward the bedroom, and all of a sudden, I felt a sharp pain in my right arm. I looked at it and saw my knife jammed into my triceps. She threw it at me as I was walking away. I looked at her again in shock and saw her running toward me with the craziest look I ever saw on someone's face. She then jumped on top of me, knocking me to the floor and starting to scratch my face like a cat. I managed to get a hold of her and threw her off of me. At that moment, she hit her head against the wall and went unconscious. I used those moments to tie her up with my good arm, and then I called the cops. When they got to the door, they told me to open it, but I couldn't. Upon closer inspection, they saw that she jammed some sort of silicone into the keyhole so that it wouldn't open. Nevertheless, they knocked it down. They took her away and me to the hospital. "Hey, you don't know, but I have something to tell you," the guy said. He sat down and started telling me about Nina. That was the girl's name. And he was the asshole who broke up with her on Valentine's Day. But that wasn't true at all. In fact, she did the same thing to him a while ago. She pretended she was crying, and he stopped on the street to see if she was okay. Then she followed him, stalked him, and judging by the scar he had on his face, even tried to kill him. The girl was put into a mental hospital, but she managed to escape. And that's why I found her on the street. And as soon as she escaped, they called him, as he was the one present when she was admitted. That's how he knew where to find me.
Breakups are hard. One of the people involved always gets hurt more than the other. And in any relationship, one person loves more than the other. These are just how humans work. And that's okay. But when a relationship turns into a full-fledged dictatorial thing, then people start to change, and the worst part of them comes to the surface. My story began like any other one. We were two young people that met at a party, and we really hit it off. Her name was Alice, and I'd go by Max. We thought we were so cute together, and people would often say that we were the perfect couple. Everywhere we went, we looked so happy and in sync, almost finishing each other's sentences. We were the type of couple you'd only see in the movies or read about in books. But as we all know, these kind of things hide an ugly truth behind the surface. My ex, Alice, was smart and driven, but she also had a not-so-good side. She was controlling. The reason we were so good together, at first glance at least, was that we were polar opposites. She was angry, hot-headed actually, controlling and demanding, while I did anything to please her. The second that Alice asked for something, even before she could finish her sentence, I'd admit that I would be on my feet, ready to make her happy. This thing went on a couple of months, and it seemed that we were both happy with this entire agreement. But little did she know that I was becoming extremely unhappy. I may have smiled all the time and did everything she asked for, but deep down inside, I became more and more frustrated. I felt like a slave, and my girlfriend was my master. Now that I think about it, I never had a say in anything. I felt truly unhappy, and one day, while Alice was out doing her nails, I was taking a walk down the street with my eyes to the ground. All of a sudden, I felt this sudden urge to look right, and I saw an old, antique bookstore. I went in, and out of the thousands of dusty old books, one spoke to me. It was something like, Become Your True Self, one of those self-help books that really have a bad rap. I flipped through some pages and then decided to buy the book. Late at night, while she was sleeping, I woke up and read that book. I then understood what a toxic relationship is, and it was exactly what I was involved in. This wasn't about love. She didn't love me, but she did love to control me. These are totally different situations. After understanding this situation in which I was involved in, the next day, after Alice demanded that I go to Starbucks and bring her a coffee, I flat out said no. I did it, and it felt exhilarating. It felt like for the first time in my life I had some sort of control. I told her to go get it herself. But that feeling of empowerment didn't last long. Alice started to laugh and taunt me. She said this was my first strike and to be careful. I asked what she meant by that, and Alice took out her phone. She had some incriminating things on me. A couple of years ago, she encouraged me to steal some money from the place I worked at. It was some sort of fraud, and I forwarded a sum into another account and then into mine. Alice had all the facts and proof she needed to get me fired and even get me arrested. At that moment, I knew that I was under her control. I couldn't escape, and later that night, when I would normally get up to read the book, instead of looking through it, I burned it. Finally, she managed to break me. I was a man without any hope of escaping that toxic relationship. From that moment on, Alice became more demanding. She would text me and say what gifts she wants, and if I wouldn't get them for her in the next hour or so, I would be in so much trouble. We never visited my parents' house because she simply didn't like them, even though they were really nice people. We would only do the things that she loved, and I would do every chore possible around the house while she was on her phone, scrolling through Instagram. Oh, and when it comes to my phone, She would hold it for me every time we were together, so that any text or any call that I would get, Alice saw it first. As time went on, I became more and more angry, but couldn't show it. I started to get into a deep depression and stopped taking care of myself, and only cared for the needs of Alice. One day, after hours of humiliation, I had enough. I needed to do something drastic and get rid of her. I would spend most of my nights looking at her while she slept. I thought of ways to get rid of her and to make it look like an accident, maybe a car crash. I could do some things to her brake system, or maybe I could put something in her drink. All these crazy thoughts were going through my head, and it was like I was a totally different person. So the next morning, I got up really early and started to make breakfast for her, as I usually did. But this time, I put some rat poison in her orange juice. Alice got up, got ready, and came downstairs. She saw the juice and said she wasn't feeling well that morning and that I should drink it. I said I wasn't hungry, but she demanded that I drink the juice. I refused once again, and Alice started screaming at me, threatening me with dire consequences. My heart started beating fast and my body started to tremble. In that moment of panic, I grabbed Alice by the neck and forced the juice down her throat. Alice's face started going pale and she dropped to the floor. Seeing this, my heart normalized and I felt a sense of relief. I finally escaped from that metaphorical prison that was called a relationship. Between now and then, I moved to a different state, changed my name and my job. I don't know what happened to Alice. It's been 365 days since that incident. Was it worth it? I don't know. Every night, due to nightmares, I wake up with a heavy chest and sweat all over my face. My hands tremble. Not a day passes when I cannot think about that night. Maybe, just maybe, this glass of orange juice would finally bring me some peace.
I've only had one girlfriend in my entire life, and I was as surprised as I could be when it happened. And you may wonder why. Well, I am and have always been a nerd. I've always been a fan of anime, video games, board games, and basically everything that would keep me inside the house and not force me to interact with other people. And when it comes to friends, well, I never had one. Even my parents were worried about me the majority of my childhood. They would look out the window and see all the neighborhood kids playing, running around, and laughing while their little Jeremy was inside, cooped up in his room, watching cartoons and not getting a bit of sunlight. But they eventually came to terms with my behavior. Anyways, fast forward. I'm now a freelancer. I made one friend in the meantime, although it was from an online game I played. But we really got along, having the same hobbies, and we would talk daily. In my opinion, that is a friend. I work from home, maintaining the same distance from other people as I did when I was a kid. I'm a programmer, duh, and I always design websites, but not as often. But let's go on with the story. At the time, I was a regular on the dark web. I never bought any items or anything from there. I just browsed around to pass the time. And since I was doing nothing wrong, just window shopping, I didn't think that my privacy and my personal data were at risk. I had to go outside and take my clothes to the dry cleaner. I got into my car and started driving. At the red light, as I was looking around the car for my phone, which I would lose on a daily basis, I felt the car moving from side to side. "What the hell?" I said, before I took my head from under the dashboard. To my surprise, I saw a girl laying on the hood of my car. I immediately put on the emergency brake and got out of the car. "Hey, are you okay?" I said. "Do you need some help?" I asked her again, taking a step towards her.
I'm fine. Sorry about that. I was looking at my phone and I guess I didn't see your car.
As I saw her face, I was mesmerized. She was the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. Bright blue eyes, freckles all over her nose and cheeks, and a crooked smile which made my legs melt. Are you sure you're okay?" I asked again while I was getting lost in her eyes.
Yes. Thank you for your concern.
She responded while smiling at me and tucking her hair behind her left ear. That was it. That was true love, in my opinion, after all. I forgot all about my social anxiety. I forgot all about the clothes. I asked her if she was free for coffee, and she said yes. That afternoon, I had the best time of my life. Like me, she was kind of nerdy herself, being a fan of the same anime I would watch. Also, I found out that she loved animals and would frequently volunteer at the local shelter. Oh, and another thing I found out about her. Her parents died when she was little. And by putting the pieces together, I realized that the incident scarred her even to this day. She was very emotional. When the waiter brought her the wrong cup of coffee, she didn't want to change the order. She wanted a cappuccino, and he brought her a tall Americano. As I politely asked him to bring her a cappuccino, she felt so embarrassed. She almost crawled under the table.
I don't want him to get in trouble. God, I hope he doesn't get fired over this,
she said while putting her face in her palms. Don't worry, I said laughing. It's just a mistake. Nobody's in trouble. I tried to comfort her. She was very emotional, to the point that every little thing would send her spiraling into a small form of depression. As the relationship went on, being about a couple of weeks in, one evening, I asked her something that I never thought I would through text messages. Hey, I really miss you, I said. I miss you too, so much, she replied. This is how the conversation started. Anyway, I won't go into the specifics, but the bottom line was that one day, I asked her for I thought she had an amazing body, and as her boyfriend, well, I didn't think I did anything wrong. She was reluctant, but eventually, she did send me about 4 pictures. Fast forward a couple of days, and everything was normal. She slept over the past 2 nights, and we had a romantic dinner. I tried to cook for her, but I ended up burning the chicken, so I just ordered Chinese and we watched our favorite anime. It was so nice. I didn't want it to end. After she left, I went online to play a multiplayer game that I was passionate about. You know that friend that I told you about? He was online too. What's up, Jeremy? He asked. Is everything okay? I barely had time to log in, and he already asked this question. I didn't know what was going on. Yeah, I guess. Everything's fine. Why? I asked him. I know you don't do it on the dark web anymore, but I do, and I saw some pictures of your girl there. What? What pictures? I asked him, not knowing what he was on about. It turned out that the pictures that she sent me were all over the dark web and gaining a whole lot of traction. I panicked. I hoped that she wouldn't see them. I logged off the game and started to use my programming knowledge to see what was going on. It turned out that my computer was hacked and it was so advanced that none of my software detected it. Oh my God, this is bad, I said to myself. I was terrified. I knew that she was into computers too, and if by any chance she would see the photos, she would blame it on me. The next thing I did was to try and find the hacker. I was kind of a pro myself and managed to track the guy down. After trying something for the entirety of the night, I managed to hack into his computer. But when I tried to delete the photos from his hard drive and from the accounts he had where he posted them online, I was greeted with a message. Really? Do you think I'm this stupid? Don't stress, you can have the photos. I know who you are, Jeremy. When I read my name, I froze, but the message wasn't over. I know you're pretty good with computers, and I will need you one day. Tell you what, I'll take down the photos if you're willing to do a favor for me sometime in the future. Tell me your response in the chat box. I didn't know what he meant, but I was so desperate that I agreed. Fine, just take them down, I wrote. Immediately, the photos were deleted from the dark web. Then, I received the last text from him. Good. Talk to you in the future. My girlfriend was finally out of harm's way, but I still had a debt to pay to this man. I didn't know what, I didn't know when. All I knew was that he owned me. Even to this day, I haven't received any instructions from him, and I hope I never do.